every vendor is going to tell you that they can save the world. Like they are all Superman, every single one of them.
It's phenomenally important to talk to your peers, and it's hard. You're not competitors in this space, right? We are all fighting bad guys. The reality is like there is so much we can share in the risk space.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Payments Corner. In the Payments Corner, I have Jacqueline back. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing good. It's been a couple of episodes, so happy to get another Payments Corner in the can here. So what should we talk about?
Well, I think we should talk about the MRC since you were just there. So let's get started on that topic.
Yeah, it was a big one. So I instead of arriving on Sunday, which I normally do, I got there on Monday, since Monday typically is like the Fraud 101, Fraud 201 classes, some of the luncheons, and I stayed all the way till Friday this time. Don't know if I'm going to stay till Friday next year, but the courses go all the way until closing ceremony is 5 o'clock on Friday. I don't know if a lot of people know that because everybody seems, or on Thursday, I mean. I don't know if a lot of people know that because everybody was checked out on Thursday and everybody was catching flights at like noon, so I'm missing half of the merchant-only sessions, and there was some valuable stuff.
Yeah.
They had one of the keynotes was Jim Browning, the guy that busts the scam call centers on YouTube.
Nice.
And, it was really cool. Like they were asked us not to take photos because he showed his face. People totally took photos. So hopefully those don't make it out there so he can stay safe. But they did on the Thursday, they did a fireside chat for merchants only with him. I was unable to attend that session. I wanted to, but I had a booked meeting at the same time. But that would have been really cool to go to. So I think next year, people might want to stay till the end of the day on Thursday, maybe catch a late flight, depending on where you have to go, maybe even do the Friday mornings. But it was good this year.
Well, question for you, because I think like lots of companies, like the ones I've worked for, often ask you to make the case. Why should you go to the MRC? So I think both you and I have different reasons, have our own reasons why we go.
Yeah.
So tell me, why'd you go?
So for me, the FaceTime that I get with my vendor partners is pretty valuable. I ask them for a lot of things. And they all know, anybody that's listening to this probably knows that I like to seriously joke around about like the prices I want and the appeasements that I want when I'm looking for contracts. So it's a good place to have like drinks while asking for certain numbers that might sound ridiculous. So you'll land somewhere in the middle, and, having a couple of drinks lowers those inhibitions to ask those sorts of questions. I think it's really good to spend time with your vendor partners too, so they understand your business. They can ask the right questions. They can see you in other scenarios. Also, it's good sometimes to for them to see you with their competitors, to know that there's options out there. But from a business standpoint, like an internal business, it's good for me to spend time with my team and have dinners with my team, have drinks with my team, to see my team. Like Bella is a great example, as we just hired Bella to do our chargebacks in December. Never seen her in person before at all. So it was really good for her to, like, we knew she was a cultural fit, but it was good to like see in person that cultural fit, and for us to like bond as a team and really get to know each other. And I think when we come out of that, it's stronger. But from a financial standpoint, which is kind of where this really started, a great example is last year is where we started our negotiations with our fraud vendor. And I asked for a number there, and I was able to reduce our monthly spend by 37%. Now, to spend $3,600 total on a conference, including hotel room and registration and food, to save $1 million a year, it's worth every single penny. Like every single old fashioned that I expensed is worth it to my company for that reduction in price for the next 3 years too. So What about you? What do you think about? How do you look at it?
Yeah, so I agree. The number one thing I get there is an opportunity to see all my vendors, right? And to talk to their competitors and them at the same time. I think what I appreciate from my vendors is they get to learn more about how their strategies fit to merchants. And so I'm very open in those conversations to help them sort of configure what they're going to talk to me next about, right? So I lead them into the topics that I'm interested in. I help them understand the difference between having a big ticket merchant versus a small ticket purchase, right? What $1 transfer is not the same as a $2 million transaction, and you've got to figure out your risk is different, and therefore how you talk to that merchant should be different, right? So anyway, I find it's a lot of time when vendors are listening and the people there are starting to make connections across merchants and into categories and into types of merchants, and they can really, you can really educate them on your business while also learning about theirs at these conferences.
So one of the things too that I've noticed myself doing is I hate like vendors' sales, like cold calls and emails. And every vendor is going to tell you that they can save the world. Like they are all Superman, every single one of them. But one of the things that I do love about going to the conference is like you can talk to other users and get the real story. Like what do they actually do that? And that's something that I've noticed because it came up. Cambria and I were recording an episode of the Fraud Focus show that we do, and we were recording the sales thing. And she's like, well, how do you choose which to listen to? And I'd never thought about it before, but it comes from those conversations. That's all right. You're using X and you're loving it. Okay, maybe I need to take a listen to that. I guess it's my peers' validation of another product is something I never thought about that before.
It's peer validation of the product. It's also peer validation of the approach, because I do think you can use some vendors as partners or as tools, right? And figuring out how you're going to create your strategy across your vendor partners is also part of what you start to figure out from your peers. They could have had a terrible experience with a vendor, but you're using it for a different purpose, and therefore that vendor is still suitable to your business, right? But you learn from them. Like you still hear from that experience of what to watch out for, and you can help create your own contracting and clauses and things you're watching out for.
That's an excellent point.
Right?
Excellent point. Yeah. I will say, like, even in my current vendor's contract, before we had signed the first initial one from the conference, people had told me, watch out for this sort of thing. And I specifically did, to your point, make sure I look forward to the contract, I struck it from it, and then added additional language around how I wanted that interpretation, I believe is how we say it in the legal terms, to be.
Or the obligation or whatever it necessarily is. Like I find one of the ones that someone warned me about at the MRC once was that the company wanted to tokenize and then own the token and the data. And when they went to transition off of that vendor, they were stuck. They had to reset all their stored cards. Yeah. And so, just watching for the clause of who owned the data at the end of the day was a huge eye opener for me. And just really, I've seen it several places since, and I've laughed every time. I'm like, because it says elsewhere that you own the data, but what it doesn't say is how to actually translate it back at the end of the day after, if the contract, heaven forbid, should expire or end, right? So you have to watch that termination phase, which no one ever wants to happen, but should be super clear. You are not going to lose all of your recurring billing.
Yeah.
Just switching your vendor, right?
That's such a good call out.
Right?
Such a good call out.
That's a really good point. And I was like, it's obvious because I would never let someone take ownership of my data as if I didn't own it. But the unwinding of it was, in conflict with that clause. And to make it easy at termination, you want to make sure that that's super clear in it.
I think when I worked for you at Ticketmaster, it was easier for me to justify obviously going to MRC. Because you understood that, the nature of our tickets at Ticketmaster, that if I learned one way to fight and win one single chargeback, essentially I could pay for the whole conference, you know? And it was a little easier then because you understood the math on how those things work. I think, especially people that just look at the cost of a conference versus what you get at, because I guess I guess if I was an accountant, oh no, that doesn't even a good example because accounting things change all the time.
Yeah.
If it was just I just went and there was no, I didn't bring home anything, I was just going for entertainment, which there's definitely conferences that do that. But people learn stuff at conferences, everybody. People learn things. There's classes.
It changes all the time, to your point. It's phenomenally important to talk to your peers, and it's hard. You're not competitors in this space, right? We're all fighting bad guys. And so you're able to talk at these conferences with people that you really aren't supposed to generally call, right? But at these conferences where someone's mediating and starts a topic and there's a lawyer in the room and they're making sure we're talking merchants to merchants and we're being really careful about it, we can be super clear about the bad guys, right? And what's working, what's not working, what's new trends, and it really is eye-opening. And I think fraud is is partly a mentored skill still.
Yep.
Getting a chargeback, you can learn by rote learning. You can memorize it. You can understand it. but then winning more often. That's mentored. And it's often like peer-to-peer conversations that really help with the winning strategies. And these merchant roundtables at MRC are absolutely the core of why you should always go to this conference, right? Is because above all conferences, that peer-to-peer learning is a key focus for the organizers. And the merchant groups are just phenomenal. And people are so prepared with their remarks to be super careful about what's proprietary. But the reality is, like, there is so much we can share in the risk space. I mean, it just makes no sense to be overly protective of the trends in the outside world of what fraudsters are trying these days, because the more people block them, the better off we all are.
Yeah, I think, to your point too about that, like, we've learned, even when you and I were at Ticketmaster, like specifically around like even American Express responses, like from our peers and from them that were there, not at that conference, but other places, that is specifically like what we need to include that we weren't including or that we should be including. And the same thing as we go through these new processes with like compelling evidence 3.0, which was very confusing for a lot of folks. And it's so nice to be able to be like, okay, you're getting compelling evidence 3.0 wins. I'm not. Tell me what you're doing. I'll tell you what I'm doing. And what am I missing on there? And I think like that really helps out a lot to maybe you're missing just a small piece that could really, really, really change it. And like with VAMP, coming, which I know we'll talk about that in a little bit, like there's a whole another set of things that like all of those people that were in the room when I was on that stage had no clue what was happening. None. And all of those probably 140, 200 people that walked away from that room probably still have no clue, but have a better idea.
They have a better idea. They have a better
they have a better idea than they did about what they need to do. And for them, that one session probably paid for the conference for the next 10 years for them.
Oh, yeah, because all of a sudden everything's going to change on what chargebacks cost, how they're evaluated. Anyway, we'll talk very specifically about that. There is another thing that I always get from the MRC, and I also get it from the LinkedIn side and the
hangover
promotion. Oh. It's what I never know. I'm pretty good for that. I just don't go to sleep. The piece is the fraud community is so strong at the MRC that recruiting is great. And I saw several people posting that they had been introduced around because they're looking. Yeah,
there was. I know. Probably you and I probably know a couple of the same people.
Yeah, I'm sure we do. Right, that were just bragging on their network about how great everyone was and how supportive and how they were introduced to new job opportunities at the MRC. I think both from if you're looking side, but also from if you're recruiting side, just a phenomenal pool of people to draw from. And I think you're getting the right kind of people there because they're learning. They've not done right. They're constantly in this business to learn more. And so, you want those kind of open-minded people that can make connections to be leading your fraud organization.
So there's a couple other people that I knew were going to be there specifically to try and find their next act. Some of them have been at their company for like 23 years, and other one have been there for 12 years. So it's very disruptive that they are no longer where they have been for most of their lives, And I will say the fraud community is so different than any other, because this is my third career choice in life. And I've been to different conferences across different verticals and industries my whole life. But this is the first one where like everybody was like super supportive. And I saw those people making sure, like other people making sure that those people were introduced to everyone they could possibly introduce them to see, if there's an opportunity. Now it's probably a little too close to the show to actually see if anything came of it. I hope it did. Yeah. But they were definitely moving and shaking with the support of the whole community, which was really nice to see.
Yeah.
End of the day.
No, I think that's special. And I would compliment the MRC's environment for that as well. It
is a little more, because you and I, we do so many of these different things each year. And the MRC has cultivated more of a relaxed, inclusive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's more of we're all hanging out, learning together, instead of we're taking a class learning together. Like I don't want to say party because that makes it sound too casual, but it's more of like a gathering. It's like a high school reunion, essentially, just every single year.
But we're actually networking to try and get people
Yeah. I will say that we have definitely outgrown the lobby bars downstairs. We need new ones. We need bigger ones because there's like 1,600 of us now, and there's like 3 conferences there at once.
That's great. Yeah.
But
And
it got a little pricey there, by the way, just for the record.
Oh, nice. So, so I wanted to talk to you about why, because I do think people need to make the case. And I think that like everything we've said about the talking to your vendors, talking to their competitors, talking to your peers and learning from your community, right? And then being able to hire. I think all of that is really important about any conference, but special at the MRC, because it is so focused on these fraud fighters side of things and chargebacks, which is not, lots of conferences hide that, bury the lead, right? So you're running around to other things during your conference, and this one's really tight.
Hey everybody, Jordan jumping in here just for a second to remind you about this week's sponsor, Disputed. Disputed.ai is their company, and the best thing about them is they're former merchants themselves. So when partnering with this particular sponsor, I was looking for someone that knows exactly what I'm going through when I deal with chargebacks every single day. Disputed has the most advanced chargeback management platform for enterprise. They're backed by extensive expertise and a commitment to partnership to get you the best possible results. Their platform analyzes the root cause of each chargeback and evaluates whether and how to fight and even the win probability. It creates optimized responses finely tuned for each case and continuously improves over time through feedback loops. Disputed AI is my first choice when looking for a partner in the space. Come see today an intelligent approach to disputes by visiting www.disputed.ai. Now let's get back to the episode.
So what was your favorite topic?
So I obviously like Jim Browning's thing. I'm a big sucker for that sort of story, like a story that has resolution. And so I'm going to have to say, obviously, the keynote, which I always like keynotes. So
okay, but 1 second. Tell us exactly what was the presentation. I know what it could have been, but I don't know what it actually was.
So Jim Browning, for those that don't know, is a very popular YouTuber. He's got well over 500,000 subscribers. He busts scams. So he lets like the tech support scam people onto his computer. And while they're messing with him, he's reverse hacking them, turning their webcams on, getting their true IPs, getting access to the webcams, sometimes like the closed circuit cams inside the closed circuit's not the right word anymore because clearly it's not, inside these call centers, and then gets the people arrested. He just had a great video that came out about a week before the conference where it was in Dubai, and they got 2,000 of the scammers arrested all at the same time, all at once. Because Dubai doesn't want that happening there either, like they want real legitimate money coming through that place. So his videos all have millions of views. A lot of people have watched them. Probably a lot of people listening to this will have seen. He literally will turn the webcam on while the guy's sitting there, and like
that's crazy.
They don't realize it's happening to them. Just like he's letting them do it, and he does it again and again. Now his was mostly about who he was, not necessarily how he does it, just that he does it, and what the results are, and how he's helping the overall community by lessening the amount of people it scams. Now we all know Erin West is doing her thing too with Operation Shamrock. She's focusing more on the non-volunteer folks that are doing it, more the people that are being human trafficked into those situations, like in Myanmar and stuff, where they are taken from their country and they are forced to do these scams. So some of the stuff that Jim Browning said that was eye-opening to me was the women that they send in these photos and these text messages. They are women that are on staff. They are in an apartment there, so they will take a phone upstairs to live chat with this victim for a few seconds to say, yeah, it's really me. I really need my phone bill paid. And I didn't know that. I thought they were just, using stolen photos, but they have real women that they have on staff. And that was bonkers to me. But it was just really fascinating. As far as like individual sessions, I unfortunately divide and conquer this conference. So my 2 most junior staff members go to the sessions, and then they do a report for me. And Steve and I do all of our vendor meetings, all our prospect meetings, all our luncheons, which that takes a lot these days. Like that is like, I usually do like I do the 9 a.m. till about 11 for like the keynote stuff. And then usually 11 to 11:30. And then we're at lunch at 12. And then we're into the afternoons, which is out at the Cabanas, at Visa, over at Forder, over at Riskified, whoever has those sorts of things. It's just a lot. Like my voice, you can hear it. It's been a week.
Well, there, yeah.
And it's still gone.
Slow recovery.
Yeah, and I did 2 panels.
Yeah, so tell me about your panels. Go on. I missed your panels. So shame on me. Go on.
It's okay. You've been to enough of my panels. So I did on Tuesday at 2:30 with Keith. You know Keith from MRC. He moderated the Visa VAMP panel. And I did that with Google. And I did that with JP Morgan, Alan from JP Morgan. And we had worked on this for a whole 5 days before because we were originally scheduled to do it with other folks that backed out of the panel.
Tell everyone briefly what it is, because I know you've got another episode on it that people should watch.
So. Yeah, and I will link the episode below. That one we kind of go into depth. Perfect. Now there's a little bit of outdated information on that because they have changed program again, and I'll talk about that. So Visa is basically changing your excessive fraud monitoring program and your basically all the fraud monitoring programs that existed before. All the stuff you got to fill out the form and say, I promise never to do this again, Dad. And if I do, I'll give you my $25,000 allowance every month until you shut me off and kick me out of the house. So they're not doing that anymore. What they're basically doing is no warning, but the thresholds are changing for merchants, but acquirers are also now bound to a threshold. So starting April 1st with a 3-month grace period with enforcement beginning July 1st, merchants are going to be bound to a 150 basis point dispute rate. Now that will include fraud chargebacks and non-fraud chargebacks. And yes, it does include your TC40 data. So anything that you have, those small dollar ones that you never see, the 3D secure chargebacks that you don't see, those will be included. So TC40, TC15 data. So anything that is in those reports will be blended together. There is, and then in 2026, it will be 90 basis points blended. So that's both again. So that's the big changes. Historically, fraud chargebacks were all that was really counted in the ratio. Non-fraud, which matters, was not counted in that specific ratio for the monitoring programs. Mm-hmm. And that's where your fees come in. Now those will be. So for merchants that have like high subscriptions that are probably listening to this, you will probably have a more closer to 50-50 ratio, hopefully, on your disputes, like your non-fraud versus non-fraud. But e-commerce merchants, pure e-commerce like me, it's more 90-95% is fraud versus non-fraud. It's not as big of a deal for e-commerce merchants that have that level, but it will matter.
So, but you bring up a really good point, which is those folks that have had are close to line but under it on fraud, but have non-fraud not counted, need to go check their non-fraud level.
So that's what we talked about on stage is like, for years, decades, we've been operating to push our fraud to the maximum level to have the maximum level of approvals all the way through. We don't want to be blocking these good customers. So you want to get as close to the edge of the threshold, 75, 70, 80 basis points, depending on when your sweet spot is, because that means you're letting the maximum amount of good orders through.
Yeah.
And now that's not going to be the case. You're going to really be watching what your fraud is, and you're going to have to be cracking some eggs to make that omelet now. Well, before, you could just let them through.
Well,
I
do think we're in the future here for friction, right? And 3D Secure now has a place, but they've.
But 3D Secure is going to count even if they pass and friendly fraud us.
Oh, that I understand, but there's a ton of data you get with 3D Secure, and you can force friction when you want to. But I do think merchants aren't going to let the issuer choose that at all. You're going to want to choose who gets that friction.
I think.
Wait, and it's not just 3D Secure. There are other forms of friction, right? So there's lots of paths. You don't have to use that one.
We've been working towards this frictionless future for so long.
I know.
And I do feel like the rug was pulled out from underneath us, and quickly too. They really announced this program at the end of the year last year and didn't really define it. Now, for the caveats for everybody listening, there are some ways that you can reduce that ratio. Originally, it was going to be CDRN, the alerts, and RDR, which is a rapid dispute resolution, which basically a chargeback comes in, you set threshold as a merchant, basically to refund or not to refund. I would say like subscription merchants, digital goods would probably want to refund. Now, CDRN, they backed out about a month and a half ago. So those will still be included in your ratio. An hour or two before we took stage, RDR fraud will also not be backed out of the ratio. Now, RDR non-fraud, if you resolve those using RDR, they will come out of that 150, soon to be 90 basis point ratio.
But
compelling evidence 3.0.
Fight a non-fraud. They're telling you not to fight the non-fraud trick.
Yeah, they just refund it. Yeah.
Just refund it, people. And I'm like, well, okay, but the non-fraud, they're lying. So what do we
Yeah.
do? Right.
Yeah, you would think that if I would resolve a fraud one, it makes more sense to me to resolve a fraud one than it does to resolve, because I should want to fight a non-fraud. I should
Right.
want to fight a non-fraud.
Yeah.
I,
You should believe that your company does enough good that the person claiming they never received probably is lying. Right? That should be, if you're good enough, if you're a true and honest merchant and you're always selling, you're a legit big business, you should know that it went and got there, right? And when you do, these chargebacks, you should know are not, in the interest of the company. So anyway, and they're encouraging you to just refund non-fraud, which is...
So I feel that they just were basically saying, we want everything to go away. Yeah. We don't want to deal with the
and we want
deal with the volume.
Right. Then the merchant can pay for
it. That's literally what they're asking for. They don't want to staff up the people to review on the issuer side. Like they don't want to deal with us fighting back this massive volume that came in, because they got to really touch it twice. They got to open it and then they got to review it. And I'm sure that they were getting issuers complaining about that. They've also, there is a couple more so compelling evidence 3.0 wins will back out from your ratio. Still got to do the work on your side. And then the order insight and the Ethica consumer clarity, both of those products, which are at the issuer, it's called deflection. So me as a consumer calling my bank saying I didn't make that purchase, and then they ping the system and it says what you really bought, and it says, well, you sure about that? Because it looks like you bought 6 other times. We think this is real. You say, oh yeah, that was me, and you hang up the phone, you go away. They count that as a deflection. Obviously it wasn't a dispute. It wasn't going to be opened anyway, but those, and you got to pay for that. That will not count against your ratio.
Yeah. So. I find it interesting that the thing that is also doesn't seem to be a focus on this round is the issuers who automated the process. I mean, the intention originally was that the issuers should limit chargebacks to those they believe are actually real.
They should be pushing back all the time on every chargeback.
Have created a frictionless chargeback process as well.
Yeah, COVID, when you could just tap on your phone, it made everything. The only one that they really, and I don't even know if that's still even the case anymore. I thought it was because like regulation Z or whatever, was if you claim fraud, you have to call and speak to a person. I thought that was the rules, but I don't know if that's the case on some of the apps anymore, but I don't know.
No, you can electronically do this on if you can see your card statement on the web or on a phone, you can usually say, I didn't do that.
And you can do you have to just sign some affidavit, electronic affidavit.
It depends on your bank, right? Obviously this changes by issuers, but the ones that are truly slick, you just highlight the line and you click it. I didn't do it.
We did talk about on stage how people will just, if they have too much friction in the process, they'll just go back and try a different reason code until they get one that pushes through. And then, so let's say that was me, Mr. Merchant, the customer's doing that to me, and then I had RDR turned on for non-fraud. That person's just getting a refund. Like, it's just rewarding more bad consumer behavior. I don't like it. I'm sorry, Visa. I know we have a good relationship. I don't like this process. I will do it because I have to, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I don't think, I do hope that between the 1.5% and the 0.9, first of all, there's some time and hopefully someone's paying attention to the data, because what you would hate to see is that the system isn't capable of the 0.9, because then consumer is learning to play the system.
Well, here's where I think the 0.9 is unattainable.
It should be deduped, right? But it should be deduplicated. The customer shouldn't be able to charge back multiple times and cost you multiple times. It should be.
Okay, yes, I agree with that. They should have one customer per customer ID. But here's the problem, which is new, which we kind of talked about on our prep call for this, which is acquirers. Acquirers have for the first time, they have their own across their entire portfolio. So, historically, acquirers have wonderful merchants like me who have a super low chargeback rate. And then they have high-risk merchants, that have higher chargeback rates. Now, they are going to be bound to a 50 basis point starting April 1st and 4th, July 1st, 2025, and 30 basis points starting in 2026. Now.
So you can't be a high-risk acquirer?
You cannot. But this is where you and I were talking, yes. You cannot. So this is where I think is going to be problematic is, let's say I was one of those merchants that pushed it to 80 and always did. And then now all of a sudden I'm above the merchant, the acquirer's threshold. So you have a bunch of merchants like me that are sub 10. Then a couple of merchants that are that. JP Morgan or Adyen or whoever the acquirer is going to look at their portfolio, see these outliers, and be like, goodbye, or try to push them to maybe authorize the net or some like higher risk situation. But what I really think is going to happen, because and this is where there's still some I think some clarifications, but as the interpretation is acquirers are going to be able to find specific merchants in their portfolio that are over whatever threshold. So the idea is if they're over the 150, the acquirers are the ones that are going to get the fee. The fee is going to be passed on, probably with some markup, to the merchant. But the acquirer will also get a fee themselves for being over in that, but that will be a per merchant on the acquirer's portfolio fee. So $5 for me, $10 for them, let's say, they're just going to pass that $10 on to me at the end of the day.
Or pass-through contract does for you.
Yes, 100%. So, or they're going to then, granted that the merchant is 150 basis points blended, but the acquirer is now requiring their merchants to be at 40 because they don't want them to go over their 50.
Right. I think you're suggesting every acquirer now has the opportunity to risk monitor this and create their own thresholds.
Their own thresholds that are outside of the actual official program.
Merchants are going to be shopping their acquirers on this topic. Like, I do think there's a consequence to an acquirer to that. And I think that behooves the acquirer to create a blended form of business, which is I'm struggling with, because we started this conversation with how important I think it is for vendors to target merchant segments. I think acquirers are better at risk if they truly accept a merchant segment. But if one merchant segment is higher risk than another merchant segment, it no longer makes any sense to specialize in that risk. And like from an underwriting point of view for payments and a fraud and chargeback expertise to support these merchants, it makes sense to specialize, right? And you're specifically saying diversify to your acquirer base. And while I mean,
and that's what it should be. It should be, there's a bunch of e-commerce, there's a bunch of digital delivery, there's a bunch of ticketing on there because they hedge each other on what it should be. And that's what makes the whole portfolio level across, because you have the e-commerce merchants that are keeping it low while you have this middle segment, of digital goods, which has more chargebacks, versus the ticketing, which, it's very seasonal on when they have those sorts of things. It makes, and that's why you see acquirers have certain hold back guarantees, or whatever, or deposit guarantees to try and hedge their own risk. Like, they should be doing their own underwriting, which they have for 20 years. Like, why does a network have to jump in on that? I think it was fine when the merchants owned it. I mean, I like that acquirers have it, but I think that the acquirers, it shouldn't be as hardcore below a merchant, because a merchant merchants are going to pay for it in the end. And like you and I were talking before we jumped on this, is you're going to see high risk merchants are going to have to decide if they want to eat those fees. And that's going to be the only way they're going to do business. So you're going to see all the cannabis stuff, and even higher risk money transfers, probably going to see the gift cards are going to see higher fees across the board, and that's going to be passed on to consumers in one way or another, just like tariffs. So,
yeah, fair enough. So, what was your other panel?
My other panel was with Pagos KPIs. What KPIs we track, why we track them. I might as well add VAMP on there. How we set baselines, and then what we've learned and actions that we've taken from the data. That was Albert's big thing, is he wanted us to have stories of where we looked at data and then we came up with an actionable thing from the data. So for us, it's just mostly regional, looking at where our high-risk regions are, like Vietnam. Usually we have a lot of fraud that originates from Vietnam, but it's not attacking Vietnam, it's attacking other regions. So our big thing is we follow, it's not honeypotting, but it is, but following where our Vietnamese fraud rings are going today. And that's where it is. But for us, we have pretty robust KPI dashboards that we use. They give us really good insight. So at any given moment, we know what our false positive rate is. And it came up, how do we measure a false positive rate? And I'll say it on here because that's going to be everybody that's listening to this question. It's customer contacts. It is hard customer contacts. because that is really the only way that you can do it. Now, that does include social media. That does include email. That does include executive escalations, as we'll call them.
I know it's yes.
Yeah. Anytime somebody has reached out in some way upset about something that was a cause of my team, no matter where it is, we do track that.
Yeah.
Now, the old rule of thumb, I don't know if it still is the case, but for every real customer contact, you pissed off about 25. We'll just take that number down a little bit and say we kind of have an idea of what we're really offending. But we do track that number every day, all day. It's delivered to my inbox every morning at 8:05 a.m. because that's when our Tableau refreshes.
Yeah. Perfect.
That one was a lot more casual, a lot easier because the VAMP one was very stuffy because people were pissed. The KPI one, it's more people learning. It's their first conference. They're trying to figure out what type of KPIs they should set. So,
yeah, and it's important that they all get clarity on why and what you learn from your KPIs, right? So, and to your point, you've been talking about knowing your thresholds and maximizing your acceptance or your customer conversion to an optimal chargeback rate. I mean, that takes a level of monitoring and sophistication that's very advanced, right? There are vendors that will do that for you. They will monitor, push to a commitment to an acceptance rate. But it's really important that new people learning how to work with fraud and figure out their impact on conversion very quickly.
And I think for us, one of the things, we just had a bunch of vendor on-sites this week. And I love when they benchmark me against either their entire portfolio, which I don't always like. I like more similar merchants to me to see it. I think that's like, if you've never asked your acquiring partner that, or even consultants that you work with, like anything else in their portfolio they can benchmark you against, do it, everybody, because it gives you a really good idea because you can think that you're doing a great job.
What are the trends and can you benchmark me?
Yeah. Can you say this one more time? Because I might have been talking over you a little bit there.
Oh, no worries. But ask every vendor what's happening in their industry. What do they want to sell you next? And can they benchmark you against something else to prove that this would be worth your while?
And I think it's super important. We even benchmark our invoices when we're negotiating against, we have that data. We use services for that data, but we can tell if we're getting a good deal or not because you never know. Like it may sound like a good deal to you. And that's basically, if you say a number and a vendor's like, oh yeah, you could do better.
Well, my gosh, I had a boss once who basically said, if someone says, yes, you haven't asked for enough. And I'm like, no, I actually ask for what I want. I'm very clear. I'm very, and I know how to do an RFI or an RFQ or an RFB, like all the different request boards, quote for information or for proposal. Like I always get more than one vendor quote.
I just did another long-term one with a vendor here, and like they actually flew out and we did the QBR at my house because it's easier sometimes. And they came like locked and loaded with like a bunch of people ready to go, run me through like this huge slideshow about why numbers need to be a certain way. And I was like, can we just skip this? Like I was like, I have a number in my head that's like the magic number. I'm like, if I say that number and we play ball, can we skip this whole slideshow? And they're like, just say the number, and I did. And they were like, actually, that's pretty fair. And I was like, there we go. I'm like, we don't have to go through this whole back and forth, make magic things work. This is the number. This is what it is. And we got it done. And now we're in business for 3 years. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, it's been really nice to talk to you. I'm very sorry I missed the MRC. Obviously, a shout out to all the organizers and everyone that did such a wonderful job.
They did a great job.
I heard.
Well, this was fun. So I'm glad to have you back.
Yeah, bye. Talk soon. Bye.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching today's episode. As we all know, chargebacks suck. It's kind of the whole reason that we're here even at all. So my friends over at Disputed have made a platform to make them suck just a little less. They're former merchants themselves, so they know exactly the pain we go through each and every day when we log in and see that pile of chargebacks. They've made a better platform that analyzes the root cause of each chargeback, evaluates whether and how to fight, and even the win probability. They create optimized responses finely tuned for each case, and they continually improve over time through feedback loop. Please visit them at www.disputed.ai or scan the QR code on the screen right now to learn how an intelligent approach to chargebacks is the right approach. Again, that's www.disputed.ai, and I want to thank them for making today's episode possible. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks.